So the way that Trump framed his argument was Mexicans are after your job. You know, Muslims are coming to kill you.
This song is anti-fascism. This song is anti-war. We stand up for our brothers and sisters in Minnesota. No KKK, no fascist USA. No Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA.
On February 6th, 2026, 2 nights before the Super Bowl, Billie Joe Armstrong stood on a stage in San Francisco and told every ICE agent in the room to quit their jobs.
This goes out to all the ICE agents out wherever you are. Quit that shitty job you're at.
He changed the lyrics to American Idiot to take a direct shot at Trump's MAGA movement. He made a pointed reference to Jeffrey Epstein. California Governor Gavin Newsom was in the crowd. The whole thing spread across social media within hours. 2 days later, Green Day took the field at Levi's Stadium in front of over 125 million viewers worldwide, and they played it completely safe. That gap between Friday night and Sunday afternoon became one of the most talked about moments of the entire Super Bowl weekend, and it raised a question that punk rock has always had to answer sooner or later. What happens when the biggest stage in the world comes with strings attached? Green Day took the field at Levi's Stadium with former Super Bowl MVPs walking out behind them. They opened with a quick tease of Good Riddance, that 1997 ballad you have heard at every graduation since the 90s, then went straight into material from American Idiot, starting with Holiday. Holiday has a bridge that goes Sieg Heil to the President Gasman.
Sieg Heil to the President Gasman.
Originally written about George W. Bush, most people assumed Armstrong would either keep it or swap it out for something about Trump. He didn't either. The band just skipped that part entirely and moved into Boulevard of Broken Dreams. If you knew the song, the gap was hard to miss. Then came American Idiot, which was the moment everyone was actually waiting for. This was where Armstrong was supposed to sing, "I'm not part of a MAGA agenda."
Not a part of a redneck agenda.
The same lyric he had performed to a packed crowd just 2 nights before. He didn't. He got through the first verse with the original lyrics. NBC cut the audio for a second when he hit the subliminal mindfuck America.
Can you hear the sound of America?
And then when the song reached the part where the lyric change always happened, he skipped it and went straight to the outro. Welcome to the Bay, it's Super Bowl 60. And that was it. The whole set was about 5 minutes. The band sounded great, and the crowd was into it. But online, things got messy pretty fast. The loudest criticism came from people who had been cheering Green Day on for years. One person on X summed it up pretty directly. Green Day skipping the entire middle of American Idiot with the anti-MAGA lyrics when they had the chance to sing it in front of millions during the current political state of our country is such a move. Sorry. Another called them performative losers who talked a big game but said nothing meaningful when it actually counted. The frustration made sense. Green Day had been handed the biggest platform in American television and played it safe. For fans who saw punk rock as being about saying the uncomfortable thing precisely when it's most inconvenient, that felt like a betrayal. Some pointed out that if the band knew the NFL wasn't going to let them do their thing, they probably shouldn't have taken the gig in the first place. Not everyone felt that way, though. Some fans argued that playing American Idiot and Holiday at a Super Bowl in 2026 was already a statement in itself, even without the modified lyrics. A few conservative viewers were just relieved the whole thing stayed relatively calm. To understand why all of this hit so hard, you have to look at what was going on around it. The Super Bowl was already politically charged before Green Day even took the field. Bad Bunny, who headlined the halftime show, had been under attack from right-wing media for weeks, simply for being a primarily Spanish-language performer. Turning Point USA announced they were running their own all-American alternative halftime show at the same time.
President Donald Trump criticizing Bad Bunny's headliner performance, mostly sung in Spanish, featuring nods to his home, U.S. territory, Puerto Rico.
With what they called English-only music. And that was just the entertainment side of things. This was February 2026, deep into Trump's second term. ICE raids were intensifying across major cities. 2 American citizens had been killed during federal operations. Protests had broken out in Minneapolis and Los Angeles. The country felt pretty divided. Green Day had been one of the only major rock bands willing to wade into all of this by name. Not vague anti-establishment statements, but actual names. Trump, Vance, Miller, Noem, specific policies, specific movements. Their 2024 album, Saviors, was a return to that kind of direct political songwriting, and Armstrong had talked openly about how much it takes out of you to keep doing it with conviction. So the Super Bowl wasn't just another gig for them. It was a chance to put their message in front of millions of people who would never go to a Green Day concert or follow them on social media. That's what made the toned-down performance sting for so many fans. It wasn't really about the lyrics. It was about what changing those lyrics had always meant, that Green Day was willing to say the thing regardless of the consequences. And at the biggest moment they'd ever had, they didn't. Neither Green Day nor the NFL has said anything publicly about what went on behind the scenes. We don't know if the NFL told them to keep it clean or if the band made that call themselves. We don't know if there was anything in the contract about it. We just don't know. What we do know is that Green Day has always been pretty good at balancing their political edge with mainstream appeal. American Idiot worked as an album, a Broadway musical, and a cultural touchstone partly because its critique was pointed but not so specific that it only applied to one moment. The song has functioned as an anti-Bush anthem, an anti-Trump anthem, and a general statement about media and conformity all at once. That kind of flexibility is part of why they've stayed relevant. The Super Bowl opening ceremony is also a different beast from a regular concert. It's shorter than the halftime show, it's designed around celebrating the game rather than the artist, and it's airing when a lot of families are just sitting down to watch. The broadcast standards are strict, and the corporate interests are massive. Even at the halftime show, which has more room to breathe, artists have to negotiate what they can and can't do directly with the NFL. Dr. Dre and Eminem found that out in 2022. The opening ceremony has even less wiggle room than that, and Green Day knew that going in. In the days after the Super Bowl, the conversation kept going. Some pointed out that the controversy had actually worked in Green Day's favor in a way. They were all over the headlines, their politics were being debated everywhere, and their name was being associated with resistance even if the performance itself had been pretty tame. For a band that had sometimes struggled to stay relevant, that kind of attention wasn't nothing. Others argued that the real punk move would have been to turn the Super Bowl down entirely. Rage Against the Machine had always refused to play corporate events that conflicted with their politics. But Green Day was never really that band. They had always existed in the mainstream, selling millions of albums and playing stadiums while also being openly political. Those two things had always sat a little uncomfortably next to each other, and the Super Bowl just made that tension very visible. The game itself moved on without much fuss. The Seattle Seahawks beat the New England Patriots 29-13, with Kenneth Walker III taking EN MVP honors. Bad Bunny's halftime show got widely praised and made history as the first primarily Spanish-language performance at a Super Bowl. About 135 million people watched worldwide. What the whole thing really comes down to is a question every political artist has to answer at some point. Do you reach as many people as possible, even if it means softening your message? Or do you keep the message intact, even if it costs you the platform? Green Day went down the middle, and pretty much nobody was fully happy about it. Conservatives still thought they had no business being there. Progressives felt they had folded at the worst possible moment, and everyone else just saw a decent 5-minute rock performance that ended a bit abruptly. Maybe that middle path was the only realistic option given the constraints they were working under. Or maybe the more honest move would have been to either go all in or not show up at all. 20 years from now, people might look back at this as the moment Green Day finished their transition from punk provocateurs to establishment act. Or they might see it as a band doing the best they could in an impossible situation. What is clear is that on February 8, 2026, Green Day had the eyes of the world on them and chose to let the songs speak without the lyrics that had come to define their recent shows. Whether that was the right call is still very much up for debate. Until then, see you in the next one.